Well, today we're going to be grading every team's offseason as there are still some free agents, but pretty for the most part, these teams are going to be what these teams are going into the draft. So we have a tier list here. Simple, not doing all the A plus, A minus, just A, B, C, D, and F. We're just going to look at all the moves each team's made, and we'll put them on the tier list here today. But without further ado, let's get into this video. First team we have is the Buffalo Bills. So first, they extended Josh Allen to a massive contract. The Bills didn't really do much, to be honest. They, in terms of additions, is pretty much they brought in Joey Bosa and they brought in Josh Palmer. They extended Shakir. I like that move because Shakir's been great for them, extending Gregory Rousseau. They did bring in Larry Ogunjobi, bring back Dane Jackson, extended Damar Hamlin are probably their biggest moves. And I guess they brought in Darrington Evans as well. But the main moves in terms of additions to the team is Josh Palmer and Joey Bosa. Now, the Josh Palmer move, it's a 3-year, $36 million contract. It's not that bad for a guy who's been solid for the Chargers in his career. He hasn't, he's not the elite receiver, but you only paid him $13 million. I don't even know how old Josh Palmer is. He's 25, so a 3-year deal is great for a guy like Josh Palmer. He could still get better. And then Joey Bosa, looking at his contract, he hasn't been the same due to age and injuries, but it's only a 1-year deal, so I'm not mad at it. You brought back all the guys you needed to bring back, like a Damar Hamlin, extended guys like Shakir and Rousseau and Josh Allen. I think it was a fine offseason. I'd probably give the Bills a B for their offseason. Next team we have is the Dolphins. Their main move was their main moves, I guess, in terms of additions. You brought in James Daniels on a 3-year, $24 million deal. You get Nick Westbrook-Akine on a great deal, in my opinion. Bringing Alexander Mattison to replace Raheem Mostert. They kind of just switched teams. I'm pretty sure Mostert went to the Raiders. You re-signed Tyrell Dodson. I like that deal. Zach Wilson's a fine backup, I guess. Larry Borum's not a bad depth piece at O-line either. They didn't make anything. They didn't make any exciting moves, whether they could or couldn't, just based on the salary they had. I really love the Westbrook-Akine contract because he kind of gives them something different in that receiver room, and he had a very productive season with the Titans, and you're paying him $3 million a year. James Daniels is a fine contract as well. Honestly, I'll probably give the Dolphins. I'll probably give them a C because I think they didn't have as much money as the Bills had, and I feel like the Bills made more moves. I'm not opposed to the moves the Dolphins made, but I'll give them a C. Next team is the Patriots. Most notably signing Milton Williams to a massive extension, but they also bring in Carlton Davis. They bring in Robert Spillane, even a guy like Marcus Epps. They get Mac Hollins. They get Morgan Moses, Harold Landry. Josh Dobbs is a great backup for Drake May. They had a ton of money to spend, and they spent it. Did they get good value? I feel like Carlton Davis was good value. Milt Williams, I think, is a little bit on the expensive side. Same thing with Harold Landry. I don't mind the deal you got out of Matt Collins, and I don't mind the Morgan Moses contract. But they had a ton of money. They didn't add any receivers outside of Matt Collins to help Drake May. But they also didn't really get a ton of great linemen, so they're not necessarily giving them a chance to take a guy like McMillan at 4. They could still go O-line here. If you don't take McMillan at 4, I don't know what receiver. I know they were active in the Chris Godwin market, but I'm actually going to give them a B here because some of the contracts I personally think are a little expensive, and you didn't really get any receivers to help out Drake May. I know you tried with Chris Godwin, but I'm going to give it a B for the Patriots. Next team is the Jets. I don't think they had a ton of money to spend. You get Justin Fields on a pretty decent deal, in my opinion, because one, it's only 2 years. You're not committing to him. You can still draft a quarterback if you want. $20 million for a quarterback is not that bad. Uh, I like I really like them bringing back Jamie and Sherwood, making sure he stays on the team. I'm not mad at the Josh Myers signing or the Andre Cisco signing. And my favorite part of the Justin Fields signing, I don't know if this is true or not, but it might give you a much better chance at keeping Garrett Wilson from wanting to leave, which I think is more valuable than bringing Justin Fields in. They didn't do too much though. I'll probably kind of similar to the Dolphins. They didn't do too much, but they didn't make anything bad. I'll give them a C. I don't know if anyone's gonna get an F. Just as a disclaimer. Next team is the Ravens. They didn't do anything. They bring in D-Hop. They re-sign Ricard and Stanley. That's literally the only notable moves they've made this offseason. I don't know how much money they had. I mean, right now they currently have about 10 million, and that doesn't include the contracts they got. So they didn't have a lot of wiggle room. You bring in D-Hop, who's just a quality player. I will be factoring in the money they had, because obviously if a team can't make any moves, I can't blame them for not making moves. You got Lamar, another weapon in D-Hop, so I liked that. Considering they didn't have any money, I think they did quite well. I'll give them a C with the money they had. Because I feel like the Dolphins had, I feel like the Jets definitely had the money to make more moves. The Dolphins not so much, so but yeah, I'll give the Ravens a C. Next team is the Bengals. Now this is very TBD to be determined here, because there was the report that they are working on extending Jamar and extending T. Higgins to about like 70 million combined. We'll see if that works out. But outside of that, you get BJ Hill back. They pretty much just did a lot of extensions. They brought Samaje Perine back. That's not an extension, but you bring BJ Hill, of course, Joseph Asai's back. But they lost a lot of guys. Like, they might lose Trey Hendrickson. Who knows what's going to happen with T. Higgins? You're going to pay Jamar a lot more money than you probably could have if you just paid him earlier. Maybe same thing with T. Higgins. I'm not a big fan of the Bengals offseason. I'll probably give it a D for the Bengals, just because I think they've put themselves in a lot worse of a position than they needed to. Next is the Browns. Browns were not given a lot of money. You get Kenny Pickett in a trade, who I think is a better backup than DTR, so I'm not totally upset with that. Who knows what's going to happen with, like Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins. They could get one of those guys to be their quarterback. They could bring Jameis back. You sign Tyrone Shoyinka. He's obviously hasn't had the best career. You're kind of taking a chance on him. Maybe it can work, maybe it doesn't. And then the Myles Garrett extension, there was all the trade reports, but you're able to keep Myles Garrett in. You paid him a lot of money to do so, but he's one of the better players in football, so I don't hate that. Again, didn't have a lot of money, so I'll probably give, because the Bengals had a ton of money, or a decent amount of money. Kind of. But I'll give the Browns a C. Next is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, the big trade for DK Metcalf, but they also bring in Darius Slay on a very good deal, in my opinion. Donald Parham can be just an okay backup, okay depth tight end. Kenneth Gainwell could be a solid running back with Jalen Warren, excuse me. And Mason Rudolph can be an okay backup if you don't get quarterback. However, I do like the DK Metcalf trade, but I'm not like insanely high on it. I don't think it was the greatest trade in terms of Pittsburgh's side of things. So they had a lot of money. I'll probably give Pittsburgh a D. The Metcalf trade is probably more like a B for them, but I think everything else lowers it. We still have to see what they do at QB, but right now it's not looking great for Pittsburgh's quarterback situation. Next team is the Texans. I really like what the Texans did to some extent. The CJ Gardner-Johnson trade was amazing. Pulling that trade off, getting Kenyon Green, who was one of the worst linemen in football, getting one of the better safeties potentially, a top tier safety, is great. And yeah, you went from a fifth round pick to a sixth round pick, but it's not that big of a deal. You also get a guy like Laken Tomlinson to help with your O line. You trade for Ed Ingram. People aren't a fan of the Laramie Tunsil trade. Originally, I wasn't a fan of it, but the more I thought about it, it was one of the worst O lines, and people are getting upset at them bringing in a new offensive line. Like, yeah, Laramie Tunsil's still a good player, but he didn't have the best season in the world. You also get Braxton Berrios, who is a quality receiver, and it's only $2 million. You bring in Christian Kirk for only a seventh round pick. That's a steal of a trade. So I'm actually a pretty big fan of what the Texans did. They didn't really have a lot of money to spend, so they just went and traded for people. And I think their trades actually ended up pretty solid. I'll actually give the Texans offseason a B. I think they could be a very good team next year, as long as that O-line can actually do something. And there's still a draft, obviously, too, that they can add pieces. Colts. I think the Colts had a very good offseason. You bring in Cam Bynum, one of the better safeties. You bring in Charvarius Ward, one of the better corners. Daniel Jones could be a serviceable backup for you, or he can compete with Anthony Richardson. Maybe get the best of Anthony Richardson because he's not competing with a 40-year-old Joe Flacco anymore. And you also bring in Khalil Herbert, who's a very solid running back. I'm going to give the Colts a B on their offseason. They did lose guys like Dayo Odeyingbo. They lost both their O linemen, which I thought could be a big hit to them. I think if they could have retained one of their O linemen, this would have been an A. But I'll give it a B for now because despite losing those guys, I like the additions they made. Next team is the Jaguars. Now, of course, they traded Christian Kirk, which isn't on here, for only a seventh round pick. And outside of that, you bring in De'Ami Brown to a 1-year deal. I wish you could give him more, though, honestly, because he could just leave. Eric Murray's a solid pickup. Jordan Lewis is one of the better nickel corners, so I'm not that mad at that pickup. But the Jags had a lot of money to spend, and they didn't spend it the best. I'll probably give them a D. I'll probably remove the F tier. I don't think I'll give anybody an F tier. I'll give the Jags a D, though. Next is the Titans. I mean, you get Van Jefferson and Dan Moore. I love the Dan Moore pickup. Thought that was a very good contract. Draymond Jones isn't a bad move. Cody Barton's a solid player. Xavier Woods has his ups and downs, but he can be a quality safety. Kevin Zeitler's not. I love the O-line additions they made, mainly Dan Moore. And they didn't have a ton of. They had a lot of money to work with, so I'm not. I think they could have done more, but I'm either gonna give them a B or a C here, because they didn't use it. They didn't. I feel like they could have used their money better, but I like the Dan Moore pickup. But it's kind of one pickup that I like, so I'll give them a C. I'll give the Titans a C. Next is the Broncos. Honestly, I'm gonna do this already. I'm giving the Broncos an A tier. You bring in Talanoa Hufanga on a very good deal. You bring in Dre Greenlaw on a very good deal. And you bring in the contracts they gave Evan Ingram, Dre Greenlaw, and Talanoa Hufanga. I think all three of them were fantastic contracts for the players that I still think those three can be going forward. I think this is and they didn't have an insane amount of money either. Hence why they got so many good deals, in my opinion. A tier off season so far for the Broncos for me. Setting up Bo Nix and that team for a lot of success. Chiefs are next. Obviously the Chiefs had very little money. They lost a lot of their guys. You know, you lose Joe Tooney, you lose Justin Reed, you lose Tershawn Wharton. But you bring in Gardner Minshew. Not a bad backup. You bring back Kareem Hunt. You bring back Hollywood Brown, Nick Bolton. You replace the loss of Justin Reed with potentially a position that you need more in corner in a good player like Christian Fulton. And one part of their offseason that I think is very underrated, They restructured Chris Jones and Mahomes' contract and freed up like 30 million. So they could still make more moves. I'll actually give the Chiefs a B tier off season because they still have a lot of money. They still brought back the guy that I think they should have brought back, which is Nick Bolton. So I like the off season for the Chiefs. Next team is the Raiders. I think it was an okay offseason. You get the Geno Smith trade. It's a fine trade in my opinion. It was really the only option they kind of had though, to be honest. You did extend Max Crosby, which was great. You brought back Malcolm Kuntz. You signed Jeremy Chin to replace Morig. But they did lose Robert Spillane. They obviously lost Morig. You get Alex Kappa, who's a fine player. They had a ton of money. So I'll give them a C. I'll give the Raiders a C for their offseason. Next team is the Chargers. Made a lot of moves here. The Najee Harris signing, I think it was a pretty decent signing to get Najee for $5 million in this system that they run. I like it. You get Mike Williams. You bring him back. I like that. Bradley Bozeman was a good re-signing. He was a quality, serviceable player for them. Mekhi Becton, I like that pickup. You bring back Tier Tart for an amazing deal. Dante Jackson's had his inconsistencies. Same with Benjamin St. Just. I never know how to say his name. They had a ton of money to spend. They still do. They have almost $60 million in cap right now. I'll give them another C. It's close to a B tier, but I'll give them a C for now. I like the Najee pickup. I like the Tier Tart contract. But they also lost a guy like Puna Ford, which I would have loved for them to keep. But so yeah, I'll give it a C. Cowboys. I'll probably give the Cowboys a. I don't know. We'll see. They obviously they lose. They brought back. I'm trying to think. They bring back Osa Odigizua. They brought back a lot of their guys, which I figured they were gonna do. That's just what the Cowboys seem to do. They don't spend money. Very frugal team. They lose Rico Dowdle and replace him with Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams. They trade for Kenneth Murray. I'm not a fan of the Cowboys offseason. I'll probably give it a D, potentially an F, but we're not going to give out Fs. I'll give the Cowboys a D for their offseason. Next team is the Giants. You didn't really hear about the Giants much, but I actually thought they did quite well. They still have money to spend. You bring back Darius Slayton on a very good deal, in my opinion. You really help out that secondary with Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland. I love those pickups. I'll give the Giants a B. The Broncos might be the only team that gets an A offseason for me, honestly. Eagles are next. Eagles were in a very tough position. You trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson for whatever reason. I don't know necessarily what they were doing with that. You bring back, of course, Zach Bond. You extended Saquon. You bring in A.J. Dillon. I like that as a backup. Josh Uche's okay. He's a solid pickup for them. You didn't really pay him anything, though, so who cares? They didn't do much. It was hard for them to make any changes, honestly. I don't want to give them a D, so I'll give them a C for the Eagles offseason. Commanders are next. I thought they had a fine offseason as well. You bring in Deebo Samuel. I like that trade. Not many people do, but I like the Deebo trade. You bring back Zach Ertz. Bring back KJ Osborne. You did lose De'Ami Brown, which I think was unfortunate. You bring back, of course, guys like Bobby Wagner. Additions, you bring Javon Kinlaw. People didn't love the contract. I'm not too upset about it. Considering the Commanders had a ton of money, I wasn't the biggest. The Laramie Tunsil trade, I do like that. They did give up a lot for that trade. I'll give them a C just because I didn't like. I think they could have done better, but I didn't. wasn't mad at the moves they made. Next is the Bears. I think, again, straight up A offseason for me. Jonah Jackson, great trade. Joe Tooney, great trade. Drew Dahlman, a good contract. Dayo Yingbo, they knew the needs they had, which was the front, the lines, the O-line, and the D-line, and they spent all that money they had, and they honestly still have about $20 million in cap. So you put Caleb Williams in the best position to succeed. I think the best thing they could do is maybe add another receiver. I don't know if you want to add any of the guys left in free agency or you wait for the draft because you might lose Keenan Allen. So I think to get a third guy next to Odunze and Moore would be good, and maybe another edge rusher. But so far, great offseason for the Bears. Next team is the Lions. They still have a ton of money. They pretty much just swapped DJ Reed and Carlton Davis. They bring back Levi Onwuzurike. They had a lot of money. Team that's, trying to win a Super Bowl. I'm not a fan of their offseason, honestly. They didn't do too much. I'll probably give them a D. I think they had a ton of money. I know they want to pay their guys, but I'll give the Lions a D because I think I like Carlton Davis over DJ Reed. Next team is the Packers. They didn't really do much. They bring Aaron Banks in, good guard. They bring in Nate Hobbs. I love the contract they gave Nate Hobbs. Honestly, they had a lot of money too, so I'm tempted to put them at D as well, but I'll give the Packers a C for now. Next team is the Vikings. Another, I already know, A-tier offseason. You bring Aaron Jones back. You get the two Colts linemen and Will Fries, Ryan Kelly. You fortify that D-line with Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. You keep Byron Murphy. Yeah, you lost Cam Bynum, but you still got Murphy back. And you got Isaiah Rodgers, one of the better, I think, nickel corners. A offseason, you are putting McCarthy in the best position to succeed. If McCarthy is a good quarterback, the Vikings team will be very, very good next year, in my opinion. Next team is the Falcons. Didn't have really any money, so I can't blame them for a lack of moves. They pretty much extended Jake Matthews. They bring in Leonard Floyd, and they bring in Divine Diablo. They had no money. You did lose Drew Dahlman. We'll see what they do with Kirk Cousins. I think that's going to be the real tell of how good the Falcons offseason is going to be outside of the draft is what they do with Kirk Cousins. Considering they had no money, it's kind of really hard to grade them. I'll give them a C just because we don't know what they're going to do with Kirk Cousins. If they do well with the Kirk Cousins situation, maybe they get a B, and if they do bad with it, maybe they drop to a D. But since the Kirk Cousins situation kind of is the only thing that they can do, I'll keep them at a C for now. Next is the Panthers. I was kind of, I didn't mind the Panthers offseason. I like the Rico Dowdle pickup to be the backup with Chuba while Brooks is out. You bring back your O-line, which was great, and you address the need that you had, which was run defense with Tershawn Wharton, Bobby Brown, Christian Roseboom, who's fine, Patrick Jones, who's fine. Trayvon Moerig's a good run-stopping physical safety. The J.C. Horn extension, some people say it's an overpay. I think it's okay because in 2-3 years, it's not going to be a bad contract. They had the money to spend. I think they spent it somewhat well. I think they could have maybe gotten more value out of the contracts. But again, contracts can look bad and are completely fine in 2 years. So I'll give the Panthers a B for their offseason. Next team is the Saints, another team that just really had no money, so you can't be too mad at what they did. And honestly, considering the money they had, I was actually pretty impressed with the Saints offseason. Justin Reed, I like that pickup. Chase Young might be a little expensive of a contract, but I don't mind it. You bring Cam Jordan back, and I like the Juwan Johnson contract as well. Honestly, considering the money they had, I'll give the Saints a B. They had nothing to work with, and I wasn't that mad at the offseason they had. Buccaneers, I think you could argue the Bucs had an A-tier offseason. You bring Chris Godwin on a steal of a contract, considering I think the Patriots offered him so much. At least one team offered him $20 million more. So to bring him in for that is a steal. Hassan Reddick's a good quality pickup. Sterling Shepard can give you some good reps. And they bring Levante David back. Considering they had no money, honestly, I'll give the Bucks an A tier offseason. I think they did great for what they were put in, the position they were put in. Next team is the Cardinals. They did have a lot of money to spend. They still do. I like that you brought Baron Browning back. I really love the Josh Sweat contract. Dalvin Tomlinson's a good player. I hope if they can, I like the Zay Jones pickup as well, or re-sign. Same with Kelvin Beachum. If they could bring back Kaiser White, I honestly could argue that they had an A tier offseason, but I still wouldn't put it at an A tier potentially, even if they bring Kaiser White back. And since they haven't, I'll probably leave them at a B for now for the Cardinals. Next team is the Rams, who I think had a phenomenal offseason. You maintain Matt Stafford on your team. You bring in Devontae Adams, one of the better receivers still. And you retain Alaric Jackson, who I thought they were going to lose. So to keep him, I think is great. They didn't add anybody on the edge rush, on the pass rush, or a linebacker, which I thought they would address. But one thing I love about their offseason is the Puda Ford contract. Getting him for less than $10 million a year, I think, is a steal. And I'm actually really happy with the Rams offseason. I honestly want to give them an A. I'm going to give the Rams an A tier offseason for me. Next team's the Niners. I think they did not have the best offseason. You pretty much lost everybody, and you replaced them with Richie Grant, Jason Pinnock, and Demarcus Robinson and Mac Jones. They had that window, and they might have lost it because now you got to pay Purdy, and they're definitely suffering the consequences. I'm going to give them a D for now. And the Seahawks are the last team up, recently signing Cooper Kupp to a 3-year deal. They still have a ton of money, so I thought they spent their money quite well. Bringing Ernest Jones back, I liked. DeMarcus Lawrence is a good pickup. MVS is a solid, underrated pickup. Sam Darnold contract may be a little expensive, but considering the big picture, what the Seahawks did, I'm a big fan of their offseason. I'll probably give them a B for now, just because they have more money to spend, so I think they could get better than what they have now. And that is my tier list for every team's offseason up to now. Pretty much their free agency as well as trades, I guess. Let me know some of your thoughts on your favorite teams offseason. How do you think they did? How do you think other teams did? If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. And as always, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time. Peace.